I'm here too.
Michelle, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me, Daniel. I'm so excited. So happy we can make this work, even though, considering the circumstances, that we could
hmm
still join up tonight and do this event.
And where are you visiting with us from?
I'm based in Mexico, so I'm calling you guys from southern Mexico, where it rained all day. There was like crazy hail this morning. The rainy season is here, which also
Mm.
means mushroom season's coming. So, silver linings.
Oh, that's fun. So you're a forager.
I'm not, but I want to learn and become. Like I go out and I look, but I don't have enough skills to eat anything yet. But
hmm
I always enjoy finding things and trying to identify and looking to develop that skill more and more for sure.
Right. I mean, it's my understanding that but see, in the Bay Area, around in these parts, for the most part, the psychedelic mushrooms that people are eating are grown indoors, right? They're consciously cultivated. Am I right in my understanding that in Mexico, for the most part, they are foraged?
It depends. I think that we have both because like over 50 species of mushrooms grow in the wild here, that there's a really big forage culture. And when you go and do a ceremony with a curandera, likely they were foraged in the local community from like a sacred spot. But it can depend. People grow them themselves here. When you buy them from a friend, it depends.
hmm
It can come from both places. Yeah.
Right.
But there is a huge forage culture, and they grow all over the mountains and down in the valley and in the jungle. It's crazy. It's awesome.
Mhm. And so you were about to leave. Well, you were in the middle of a tour when you had to go home.
So I actually didn't end up doing the tour at all. I postponed everything less than 48 hours before I
Mhm.
was about to get on a plane for Denver from Mexico. So luckily I wasn't like out in the middle away from home and my family. When things really started to get more serious, I decided to postpone. Yeah. Right before it was a big shock. I was like that whole day shopping and like buying presents for the event organizers, just getting my bus tickets, everything. And then that night is when Trump came on and announced that travel from Europe was going to be stopped. And it was like this like a light bulb moment that it actually was irresponsible of me to encourage these big groups and to go out in and out of all these airports and then possibly expose people. It was a big disappointment, but I'm getting over it and things like this help, and just glad to stay connected with everyone.
Right. Of course, my big takeaway from what you just said there is that I was going to get a present.
I was buying like local coffee and stuff for everyone to like
Right.
bring and show my appreciation. And yeah, no.
So,
Someday though, I got you.
and so you were touring in support of your book, The Psychedelic Mushroom Companion. And I see that some people have read it already.
Oh my
Can we
God.
get like a show of hands, or maybe somebody can type in the side of the window if you have in fact read it already?
I'm going to cry in like the first 5 minutes of this event, you guys. This is so cool. Oh my God.
Um, hey, I'm going to ask you to mute yourself, please.
Hello.
Hey, we're just asking everyone to mute for now. We'll do some questions at the end though, if you don't mind.
I'll
Thank
mute. I'll mute
you.
you for you.
Thanks, guys.
So, will you tell us a little bit about the book?
Yeah, so I have a copy right here. This is my book, Your Psilocybin Mushroom Companion. I think it's backwards for everyone, but it's basically a guide on how to use mushrooms safely and responsibly. Just everything that you should consider when you're considering a mushroom trip. And so, oops, sorry, a little distracted by someone's audio, but every chapter is like a different subject on safe mushroom use, from dosage, how to prepare your set and setting, how to integrate, how to navigate the psychedelic space and deal with challenging trips. The beginning of the book is more like, what are mushrooms? Why do people use them? How do scientists use them? How do indigenous people ceremonially use them? Things like that. And yeah, it's meant to give everyone all the safety information in one place, whether you're planning a journey at home with loved ones or friends, or considering a more therapeutic experience with maybe a therapist or a retreat. It's like how to choose these things, how to start this whole process of like, how do you even know what's right for you? You know, I don't like give step by step, this is what you have to do. It's more like, this is what people do that works for them. And you can kind of pick and choose things that you think speak to you that will work for you. Because that's what this whole thing is about, is you want to feel safe and comfortable as an individual. So what works for one person might not work for everyone. But I give you all the stuff that's out there so you can choose the right experience for you. That's the idea.
This is boring.
And so what inspired this?
Just that there's more people using mushrooms than ever before, with decriminalization initiatives, Michael Pollan's book, and to just make sure that they're doing so safely, that they have all the tools they need to do it.
And so what are some of the most important things, would you say, for safety?
Definitely dose is really important for especially going into a first mushroom trip, and set and setting is really important. And sorry, it just got a little creeped out there.
Yeah, this guy's really committed to his bit.
But the mushrooms will, overtake them. And so set and setting is this like idea that a lot of you are probably familiar with, that your mindset and your environment really influence your psychedelic experience. And there's all these things you can do to prepare yourself. And so the book goes into that a lot, and we can talk about that a lot, because that can like really influence your journey more than anything else, really. Dose is also up there, but, if you're in a really hectic and stressful place and you do mushrooms kind of spontaneously, your trip is more likely to be hectic and overwhelming. But if you plan and you do it in a beautiful, tranquil setting with really close friends or a trip sitter, something like that, you're more likely to have a powerful experience.
What are some of your favorite ways to manage your mind, manage your mindset?
I'm still trying to figure those out, surprisingly. But for me, like, preparing my mindset is relaxing, which is actually really hard for me. I'm like a pretty high-strung, stressed out person. And so I really have to like take the whole day before a mushroom trip, or like the morning before, to like relax. Maybe that's just like walking my dogs, or taking a bubble bath, or like literally anything that calms me down. Sorry, there's some music. Maybe I can mute this guy. Okay, thank you.
I remove him and he comes back.
Yeah, no worries. It's cool. Well, a lot of people
it's sort of like, what it reminds me of is when, you're trying to have a nice, pleasant psychedelic trip, and then like a thought arises. Like an unpleasant thought, you're no good. And you breathe and you make it go away and everything's calm again. And then a voice comes up and it's like, you're unlovable. And then you got to breathe and center. And so we've got that going on.
It's exactly what's happening. I'm just trying to trust the process, breathe through and release, do all the navigation skills that I always tell other people to do, just right now in my...
Sometimes you can control the setting.
Girls, I do adore. You put your number on this paper, cause I would love to take you back when you get on top. I got a Spanish chick, she don't like me to roam.
Sorry. Yeah, we'll just power through.
You use the term navigation skills.
Yeah, so that's what I use to refer to like, how do you trip? Like, what do you do when it's working? And there's some things you can do. It's pretty simple stuff, just like breathing, connecting with your breath, just like, sometimes it helps to take a really deep breath and then exhale for even longer than you inhaled, and to just like, and just connect with your breath. Where do you feel it? Where do you, is it touching the bottom of your nose? These kind of meditation type things. Other navigation skills are just like accepting the experience no matter what it is. Like if it's stressful and there's all this stuff going on like right now, just accept and release, show it like compassion and curiosity rather than any kind of like shame or embarrassment or fear really helps, because then you can get stuck into these like negative thought loops when you start feeling like embarrassed or shameful of your thoughts. And usually they're just coming up because they need to, if like negative stuff's coming up. And if you breathe through it, show it some curiosity, see what it has to show you, likely you can learn something from it and move on to the next destination in your journey. And it can be a learning experience.
Let's talk more about the compassion and curiosity. Can you dive into that a little bit deeper?
Yeah, so I'm trying to find an example. Like, let's say something comes up for you and you start like, I'm trying to think of an example of mine that I could use that's pretty solid. But like often things that embarrass me come up, like I can deal with a lot of self-esteem issues and stuff. And so like when I'm on any dose of mushrooms, things can bubble up. Like how I treat my partner is the example I always use because it's a pretty simple one. Like I can be kind of demanding sometimes, and it like when that comes up when I'm tripping, I feel so bad. I'm like, oh my god, I'm always asking stuff of him, and like, am I returning that? And I start crying and it feels really like intense. But instead of like getting caught up in like what a bad shitty girlfriend I am, like I can show it like I can show myself compassion, and I can show that feeling compassion. And then I can like, and once I like let go to it, and then I can realize like there's all this stuff I can do moving forward that won't make me such a demanding person. Like I can take a bigger hand in the chores at home and cooking dinner and walking the dogs and all the stuff that like we have to negotiate as a couple. And that's then part of my integration. Showing things curiosity would be more like if things get a little confusing, like psychedelic experiences can, just not be of this world. It's not always so intellectual, right? It can be like really weird. And instead of being afraid of things that you're seeing or feeling or experiencing, show them curiosity is a way to approach that. It's like another way of saying acceptance, but like, what are you here to teach me? Like, why is this big deer in my living room? Like, what does that mean to me? You can like start to explore it, and then there might be some kind of insight on the other side. That's my idea anyway.
Very well said. Very, very well said.
Thank you.
So I'm really curious. What's been coming up a lot for me is hearing people talk about what does it mean to use psychedelics in a world that is in the middle of a pandemic?
I mean, that's a tricky one. I think like for me personally, I'm not engaging a lot right now. I have a lot. It's really stressful for me. And so the reason that I don't want to go in is because mushrooms can really kind of like tune me in to the universe. And right now the universe is super heavy. Things are really stressful and dark and kind of scary. And I don't know if I want to be more in tune to that. I don't know if I can handle that. I think that might be a bit overwhelming for me. And so I'm not going in right now. I have some family members too that like have the virus and that are struggling to get fresh groceries and things. And I think those things would just cause me like, instead of like learning from them, I think I would just be too overwhelmed by it. But I think like there's certainly some folks who can benefit right now. And, I think the first thing you'll need to do is just kind of like look at your intentions. Like, why do you want to go into a psychedelic experience right now? And, if there's certainly reasons, and like, I just think you have to be like really honest and open with your current emotional state, like what's going on with you and your family and your whole life. And if you think you can handle it, then I think you can do, if you do everything else safely, if you're a more experienced psychonaut or whatever you want to call it, like, yeah, maybe there could be reasons for journeying right now for sure. I just think, yeah, do so safely. Make sure you have some kind of support. Like if you're totally alone, like if your quarantine is just you, make sure you tell someone else what you're doing, I think, for sure. And maybe keep your doses more in the low, moderate range to keep it kind of on this earthly plane. I don't want you to go too far and kind of forget where you are, who you are, and end up somewhere outside spreading germs. No.
Right.
But I mean, I think that's a tough one. I'm struggling with that right now. I'm tempted to go in, and then I'm like, I'm not sure. I have to wait till it feels right for me personally.
Right. I mean, even in my meditations, I am finding I get very open in my meditation practices, and I can feel like I'm tapping into the collective. And sometimes I feel like I have the wherewithal to be a healing presence for the world, and to sort of extend that compassion that we're talking about to other people who are in grave places of sickness and suffering. And I can only imagine that would be magnified quite a bit in a mushroom journey. And I mean, I have a newborn, and it's not really the right time for me to I can't take a day, but
Yeah.
but it seems like there is a possibility for real psychedelic soldiers to process some stuff.
Definitely. And I'm not the type of person to tell anyone like what they should and shouldn't do. Cognitive liberty, is a big, important part of my whole like deal. So yeah, I just think people need to check in with them. Like I see someone commenting that like, yeah, they're getting a lot of big insights about the state of the world right now. And that could be important work too. So, yeah, for the soldiers out there, like fight for the rest of us. Yeah, it's an interesting one. There's definitely a lot more to say about it. If people have more questions at the end, we can talk about it more.
Mm-hmm. So what about you? You also, in your book, you talk about picking the right facilitator.
Yeah, this is a hard one too, because, facilitators are typically underground unless you're going to a retreat or you get into a clinical trial. And even the retreat facilitators, there's a lot of really great ones, but, everyone's human. And so you really, I think, to pick a good facilitator, you got to get to know them a little bit first, because otherwise you're not going to really know if you'll feel safe and comfortable with them, because that's a huge part of it is this person is there to hold space for you while you go into a really likely a strong psychedelic experience. And if you don't feel comfortable around them just normally, like that's going to be amplified around them on mushrooms, and you won't really be able to release to the substance. And then of course there's more serious safety issues, like if you actually can't trust this person because sexual abuse is a real thing in this community, which is so unfortunate but a reality. So I think another important thing, and just like other kinds of abuses, is to not only get to know that facilitator, whether it's on the phone or video chat or some way like that, but you should try to talk to other people they've worked with. I think that's a good way to learn if this is a safe person to work with. If it's a retreat, there'll be some things online. That's harder to find with underground therapists, right? So if you're finding this person in your community, talk to other people they've worked with in your community to make sure there's like nothing weird going on, that they're a trustworthy person. But then I think there's a lot of benefits to working with a facilitator, and there's certain people that feel a lot more comfortable doing this whole thing with a facilitator. So yeah, there's a lot to it for sure.
And when I think about this process of getting to know them, there are a lot of, in any business because it's also a business relationship.
Yeah.
Money is often being exchanged. In business relationships, it's good to have clear expectations and boundaries. And
contracts are real in this world too.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes in a loosey-goosey hippie world, we just sort of like think that it's all good. Whereas, it might be really important for somebody to say, I have a history of sexual abuse, and it's like, really, I need to agree that, there's not going to be any sexual contact, and that you're not going to touch me like that. You can massage my hands, but like, that's it, kind of thing. And to just sort of make the implicit explicit to get people on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk about that in my trip sitting chapter. So a trip sitter is a little different than a facilitator because they're just often a little, less experienced, or that's not typically true. There's just some differences, but I think discussing boundaries is a huge thing to prepare for like a journeyer and a facilitator or trip sitter. So, boundaries of touch and other things like, are they allowed to open your front door if it rings? Like, do you want them to offer to drive you to a park at the end of the trip so you can like come down in nature? There's like all little things you can negotiate first. And it's important because you want everything to be transparent before you go in. Because if things like surprises are never good on mushrooms, like,
Right.
And so if everything's not clear and negotiated first, there can be like kind of lingering feelings of uncertainty, which can spiral out into kind of paranoid thoughts for the journeyer. And just transparency is so crucial in this. To make the journeyer feel the most comfortable possible. And that's
Right.
the key, right?
And if you find a facilitator that isn't comfortable having that conversation with you,
Red flag.
that's a red flag.
Yeah. For sure. I think it's a hard world to navigate. I really hope that there's more options with decriminalization and stuff for some kind of like registered list of people who do this, and they can be vetted in some other way. We're a little bit far off from that, but, talk to your community. They'll likely know of trustworthy facilitators in your area or retreats or things like that you can attend. So it takes a bit of research. You have to be a little bit of a reporter first to find a safe place, I think.
So let's say, so now you found one, right? So now you have found one and you figured out kind of a good facilitator for you. What sort of process, like how proactive do you think people, should be in that process? Or are they just letting this facilitator, this guide take them on a journey? And if so, what should they expect?
My experience is more in the retreat world. I've never actually worked one-on-one with an underground guide. So that's a hard one for me to answer, to be honest. Maybe you have some insights you can share, but, I think there's a lot of options.
Well, tell me about Retreat World then.
Yeah. So what about retreats?
The thing, let's start off with an anecdote.
Yeah, so I've been to a retreat as a guest, and I've volunteered recently as a trip sitter. So I have both experiences. I wrote about my experience as a guest quite a bit, and I had such a powerful experience. I think I want to like bring everyone I know on these retreats now. Like when I got back from the last one, I was messaging all my colleagues and friends at DoubleBlind Magazine. I was like, we have to do a retreat together. We're going to just like, it's going to be amazing. But, and I think people, they're like, wait, doesn't that mean you're like, want to go do mushrooms with a bunch of strangers? And people get really turned off by that. And I think that it's actually really different. It's not quite like that. And for me, as someone who struggles with some social anxiety and like shyness, trouble speaking up and stuff, I went on a group retreat with like 17 strangers. I got to know the facilitators over the phone for like a month or so beforehand, and I felt comfortable with them. And now like one of them is a really close friend of mine who might be here. I'm not sure. But the group experience was really powerful for me because not only did the trips offer me this great insight, but it was all the space in between our journeys. We were there for a week and we journeyed every other day. And I really learned more about myself and how I interact with others and how I can improve that. Like, while I was just like chatting with people and or like at home, like reflecting on just like the conversations I had in the normal space, and just like watch myself progressively just become more comfortable. And I learned so much about how like I have to stop comparing myself to everyone. Like I think that everyone has it really easy and I have it really hard, but I learned that that's like so stupid. We're all struggling. No one's better or worse, or, you know, things can be really hard, and sometimes people are struggling more than others, but it's a balance. It's not productive to always be comparing myself. And so I got all these other lessons, like even outside of the journeys, which was really powerful and really helped me learn the importance of community, and not just like tripping in a group of people, but how important it is to stay connected and to have close and personal relationships, and to be vulnerable with people, to open up and not be so reserved. Like I learned so much. And I think that group retreats, they're not for everyone. Mushrooms aren't for everyone either, but I think that people get turned off because, you know, they don't want to go do this with a bunch of strangers. But I think that it actually helped my like social anxiety and things like that so much, doing that in this situation that made me a little uncomfortable, but I was still able to let go to it and learn so much. And yeah,
I
retreats are
suppose after a week of eating mushrooms with people, they're not really strangers anymore.
definitely not. By the second trip, even the first trip was my hardest. And that makes sense, right? Because it was this new situation. I was a little uncomfortable. But by the third one, and I knew everyone so well after the integration meetings and going to the beach together and all this stuff, that I was really able to let go. And I did 4 grams, and I had one of my most like mystical type experiences in that safe container. And the container that you create too, it was a ceremonial retreat. And so we did mushrooms together in ceremony. And that was also a really powerful learning experience for me. I hadn't taken ceremony too seriously before this. And now I really see there's a lot of benefits, because it's the ceremony that holds the space for you. Like, yes, there's trip sitters there, but it's this whole ceremonial container that you create that really just lets you go into the experience and accept things as they come, because you kind of realize that it's just all part of this process that you're all in together. And it's a really powerful tool to using mushrooms for healing and insight and personal growth.
Right. And perhaps even as people leave, you know, one of the nice things about these retreats is that we leave at the end. And then we go back into our, I mean, not that we don't love it, but that we leave and go back into our lives. And that we take things like perhaps being a little bit more easygoing with people we don't know yet, or bringing a little bit more of the sacred into our daily lives, and being a little bit more reverent with our activities. So I'm just curious, like what your vision is for a world that is proliferating with kind of ceremonial use.
What really inspires me lately are folks who make their own ceremonies. And I think that's really cool, and something that I hope continues to take off as mushroom culture takes off in America. Because in other cultures, I think, like here in Mexico, it's actually a little weird to do mushrooms outside a ceremony. Like people do it. There's like a psytrance community and like whatnot. But when I talk to my friends who grew up here and we talk about mushrooms, they're like, oh, that's for healing. Like my friend went to Oaxaca and worked with the curandero, and like now they don't have asthma or like something weird. It's oftentimes physical stuff too, not just emotional, but both for sure. And so as it takes off in like America and Canada and places, you know, with Western ceremonies, I hope that we also can incorporate our own mushroom ceremonies, whether that's like, yeah, what you're making at home with your friends and loved ones, or if there are communal spaces to go and join other ceremonies, learn about other cultures' ceremonies. That would be so cool. Like, I think if people started there and they could learn a lot, and then they could go home and take home practices that spoke to them and create their own rituals, do that 2 or 3 times a year, like, oh, the world could be a beautiful place.
So are there any elements fairly ubiquitous to ceremony?
What do you mean?
I don't know. It's a neat question that popped up. Fidel Costco would like to know, what in your experience makes a ceremony?
This is something I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I'm not a ceremony expert. I'm like a ceremony intern.
Okay.
But, I think for a mushroom ceremony, I mean, eating mushrooms are going to be the one thing that it's involved with all of them, right? And maybe you do so mindfully, but otherwise, I mean, I'm not really sure. I think altar building is a really common one, and you can build an altar in your home with items of significance and spiritual items. It's really like your spiritual signature is your altar, and that can help ground you, and you can go to it during the journey, especially if the journey is getting confusing or scary. It can really help ground you to go pray at your altar, light a candle, or maybe have some candles lit in the glass ones with the high glass, not candlesticks. And but that's a common one, and that's one that's really popular in Latin America with mushroom ceremonies. And I think, but that's not a typical American practice. There's a lot of Americans doing it, and I think it's cool and great, and they're getting a lot out of it. I don't think your ceremony necessarily has to have an altar. I'm not really sure. Yeah, that's a good question. I think ceremony is when you're really communing with nature or the spirits or whatever you believe in. And it's there sometimes and it's not sometimes.
Well, here's a question. Will you compare and contrast ceremony and container? Because there's a lot of talk about creating the container.
Yeah. So ceremonies create containers themselves, right? Like, so a ceremony can mark an event as significant, like a wedding, is a graduation, a funeral. They're all ceremonies. And when you're there, you're in this container of celebrating someone's love or mourning a loss, right? In the case of weddings or funerals. And the container, it's like the whole vibe. It like helps you process the whole experience. It's really hard to explain. It's not just in ceremonies. I mean, I went to a breathwork class in New York a few months ago, and we didn't really do a ceremony, but we still created this really powerful container that everyone was there, like 25 people were there on their yoga mats and doing that intense breathing, and the music was playing, and the facilitator was walking around and sometimes like shaking your legs and stuff, and the lights were dim, and it just created, but like a concert could be a container. You're all there watching the music and you're all on the same like kind of wavelength. And I mean, ceremonies can create containers, but containers can be created in all sorts of ways. And that can really just help you process the psychedelic experience and just release to it, not be afraid of it. It's all thing. Sorry.
For example, we created a more consistent container here when we locked the room.
Here, just in this chat, I know. You're right. Chat. It's interesting.
It was like the energy was a little skitsy, and there was these interruptions happening, and it was a little bit all over the place, and it was upsetting my nervous system. I could have been the only person whose nervous system it was upsetting. And you're right. And so, like, of course, I only sort of know how to use Zoom, So I found the button that locked the room, and now we're in a container together. you
We're all on
know?
the same page. Like, right, a classroom could be a container. There's so many containers, and you just have to create the right one that facilitates a mushroom experience. And I think that's where the ceremony comes in. Helps you mark this as like a significant event to your whole life. And that's kind of how a lot of people see mushrooms, especially compared to other psychedelics. Like mushrooms and ayahuasca are like these life significant events sometimes, just
Yeah.
feel so meaningful. Where sometimes other things, they still feel significant, but a little less so to me, a little less sacred in a way.
You're reminding me, can I tell us a quick story about a fish show?
Please. Yeah. That's all we need right now, a fish interlude.
I think it was like a New Year's run in the late 90s. And I was very, very high in New England. And the show was very intense. And there was part of me that wanted to run out into the hallway because it was too much. And I could kind of feel that like there was like people next to me that they wanted to run into the hallway too. But I was like, I can't leave. Like if I leave, like it's over. I have to work through this. I have to just dance harder, like to move this energy and to like deal with the terror and the overwhelmingness of it all. And so I danced through it, but the guy next to me, he left.
Interesting.
He couldn't make it. He left out of the room. And I was like, when I saw him go, it just made me want to redouble my efforts. I was like, I gotta stick this out. And, you know, I got to stay in the container. I got to stay in the container for better or worse. So, you know, it's interesting when we get tested like that.
Absolutely. And when you do psychedelics in a ceremonial container, I think there's definitely the temptation to want to leave. But you often, like in the retreat setup, you'll like sign a contract that says like, I will not leave the ceremonial container and like beg you to go back to my room. Like, I understand we're all in this together until the end. And it can be hard. But the mushroom experience can be hard, right? It's not always fun and games. Like you're kind of in it to almost challenge yourself sometimes in a way and to release to those difficult things. And I mean, there's a lot of things in life like that. I think acupuncture is like that. I hate acupuncture, but I'm like, I know I'll feel better after if I just try to release to this.
Right.
Some things are hard and you just have to keep doing it. But yeah, containers are interesting. I think if you can try to set one up even when you're journeying at home, just you and your partner or something, it can just help you feel safer and just do it. Just get into it.
Well, one way I sometimes look at it is, you know, what would you do if you were hosting God in your living room? You know, like if you were inviting God to come out and come hang out in your living room, like what would you at least clean?
I have a line in the book where I'm like, a lot of people told me that they like to tidy the house first because like when they trip, if they see all this grime and dust, they can get a little spiraled out. But also I kind of phrased it like, you know, treat the mushrooms as your honored guests. Like maybe you want to tidy, maybe you want to hang some fairy lights, put some cool music, or like, you know, if you want to set up your setting like that, treat the mushrooms as your honored guests. What would they want? Yeah, I think, or God, that's another one. To me, maybe mushrooms and God can be pretty close. So, you know, that's where I would with that.
You know, the doorway too, you know, it's like the mushrooms sort of, yeah. You know, I guess the mushrooms either are or are not God, but, you know, the result is the same. And so it's like, how would you dress? You know, would you dress up?
Yeah. You know, so when I was a facilitator or like a volunteer at a retreat more recently, a couple of months ago, it was an all women's retreat. And before our first ceremony, we did adornment. Like we did some face paint and all the women dressed up. I actually didn't bring a dress. I'm not a big dress person, but there was, you know, cosmically this really cute little dress store across from the hotel that was exactly my style. And I got this like cute little dress I could wear while I was trip sitting. And it did make me feel nice. I was just going to wear these like ugly old shorts and a t-shirt because we were down by the beach and just wearing this like kind of cosmic dress and just, you know, and like for people who like to their getting ready routine. You know, it preps them for going out into the world, whether it's like makeup or your hair or like whatever it is. You know, that prepares you, right, for the next step, for going out in public. So if that helps you prepare for the next step, which is your mushroom trip, like, why not do that? Do whatever makes you feel like you're, you know, preparing, you're getting ready for the mushroom gods.
You reminded me of an issue that happened. You know RockMed? Have you heard of RockMed?
No.
RockMed was like proto-Zendo. It existed
Oh,
before,
interesting.
and it's a Bay Area thing. It came out of the Hate Street Free Clinic, which was like a very progressive free clinic that started, you know, in the Summer of Love days. And so, you know, these guys, these are like old heads who have been around forever, and they are at all of the concerts and taking care of the trippers, you know, and other people who need medical care. But a lot of it, you know, they, you know, they're sometimes called Jedis, you know, this is what they call themselves. And so there would be these old hippies that looked a lot, you know, kind of like Santa Claus, and they'd be wearing like these bright tie-dyes. And it was like a very comfortable, from what I hear, I've never, there were times I could have used them, but, you know, I never ended up hanging out there really. But apparently it was like a very comfortable, easygoing kind of place to be. A few years ago, RockMed sort of had a makeover that was a little bit more corporate, and they're sort of taken over by Health Rate 360, which is an amazing organization that is also fighting for healthcare as a human right. But what they said is that if you're going to work the tents at concerts, you have to wear our red t-shirts. And so the costumes changed from these almost ceremonial tie-dyes, right? That is like enjoyable for somebody on psychedelics. Like, oh, I can trust an old hippie in a tie-dye. Is much easier than like, oh, this person has got like a scary bright red shirt on. And so there was a little bit of dissension in the ranks around that decision.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I could see that. Like, and kind of if you see everyone in the same colored shirt too, if you were tripping and like looking for help, you might be like, run away. Like, those are people you're not supposed to go talk to, like thinking like park rangers or the kinds of things I would avoid when I'm on mushrooms. But right. A tie-dye shirt, like, you know, that's a safe place.
You know, I think now that you mention it, I think that they ended up commissioning like 200 of the same tie-dyes. So they're still uniform, but they're like blue uniform with like a red cross in tie-dye, and I think that works.
That makes sense, because yeah, you don't want to go up to any guy in tie-dye looking for help at a concert, because yeah, that makes sense. I like that.
Yeah, indeed. What else do you want to tell people about what you want them to know before maybe we take some questions?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a weird time. We were supposed to be doing this event to like kind of teach newbies on, you know, what safe tripping for the first time was like. And it's like, I kind of want to tell people in quarantine is maybe not the best first time trip, right? But like, I don't really know. That's going to be up to every individual. So it's like such a weird, like a different kind of event than I was planning. Like all the stuff I wanted to talk about, I think maybe some of the viewers already know, like safe beginner doses and how to, like that kind of stuff we can talk about. We could talk about integration a little bit more if you wanted, how to begin to do some integration work on your own if you're doing this stuff on your own. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to tell people dose-wise, like, I think someone was commenting about microdoses being safe in quarantine. And sure, like if you have experienced microdosing and it really helps you with like some kind of thing, like, yeah, I don't think you have to stop per se. I know for me, even microdoses can make me like a little bit more emotional. And because I am so emotional right now, like even that I'm, you know, not going into too often, but it can help folks stay close to the medicine, and that can be really important right now because I think people are feeling really disconnected, isolated, depressed. I mean, it's hard to stay alone when spring's starting to start out there inside. I worry about people giving up a little alone and home. And, you know, if mushrooms will help you, or microdosing will help you not give up, well, then that's really important. But I think that, like, I say in the book, safe first time doses beyond if you want a little bit more than a microdose. It used to be common that you take a whole full 3.5 gram eighth for your first time, but I don't really think that's necessary. I think that's a good goal to work toward. It's a powerful experience. You can take some practicing those navigation skills, like letting go and breathing and just like going with the experience rather than fighting it. And so I say folks start with somewhere between 0.5 and 2 grams. It depends on the strength of the medicine and everything and what you want out of the experience. And I think that would also be a safe quarantine dose. Although if you are more experienced, I know for me, sometimes those low doses can kind of bubble up negative emotions without kind of a release. It can kind of just get stuck in the mud in a way. And so I do worry about people taking low doses during this time. You might kind of, for me, I think that if I only took 1.5 grams, for instance, right now, I might just dwell on my negative stuff in a more intellectual way than kind of transcend them, which can happen on a dose higher than like 3 grams for me. So it's complicated. So I think if you are more experienced and you're looking to kind of find the light, you know, in a way, maybe 2.5 to 3.5 grams would be safe, especially if you know the medicine you're already working with and you know what that experience is like. If it's new mushrooms that you've never tried before, stay on the lower side just to stay safe, I think, for sure. And then I think that what we could all be doing, whether or not we're going into psychedelic experiences right now, is integration. And I think for me right now, more so than going on some inner journeys, remembering the lessons I learned on my journeys has been really important to help me get through this weird time. You know, that I've gotten a lot of really powerful downloads that give me strength, you know, when things are getting really hard. Like, you know, I'm not alone. We are all connected and special. And you know, I've gotten some other downloads that are like, doubt is stupid. You just got to go for it. Who's holding you back? Just you. And that's so true. And so these kinds of things, so I don't get, you know, stuck in this depressing time, I keep reminding myself. And I think that's important for others. You know, if you have had powerful experiences, rather than looking for another one, maybe reflect on the ones you've had. What are they still teaching you? And what can they still teach you? How can they give you strength right now? And good tools to do that are coming to community integration meetings like the ones Daniel hosts every Wednesday, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I mean, that has been really interesting. You know,
what has that been like? I've been meaning to come to one.
So the first 2 that we had since lockdown, because San Francisco's been, you know, we're in week 3.
Yeah.
The first 2 was people just being like, what the fuck is going on? and the one yesterday, people were sort of a little bit more settled and wanting to process their stuff.
Yeah.
And it was sweet. And there was one guy who managed to, you know, he lives kind of in nature. And so, you know, he was able to go hiking for the day in nature and, you know, didn't really see anybody and things like that. But it is always astounding to me how those, and especially in conversation with community, how I can learn something new from an experience from years ago. You know, and especially it's like somebody will say something that will set it off. It's almost like those spaghetti westerns, those western movies where like there's 7 people and each one has like a piece of the map to the treasure.
Yeah.
And that's what Integration Circle feels like. It's like somebody will tell a story and I'll be like, oh, that's what happened 5 years ago.
Wow, totally. Yeah, so I think this is such a good time to be processing other journeys. Yeah, whether it's going to these meetings and chatting and things are just sparking. For me, it's been journaling. I have a lot more time to journal than before because
Mm-hmm.
just have a lot more free time. And there's, I guess we all have a lot more free time for things like other tools like yoga and meditation. If that's already a practice you have, if it's not necessary to like start a new practice, but if it speaks to you, it's a good time. Just try.
Well, there's,
um,
everybody gets to take guitar lessons and go to yoga class on Zoom now.
yeah. So, I mean, I hate saying there's no excuses because there is a good excuse. We're all feeling really stressed out. And I actually spent the first 2 weeks of like our quarantine, like ignoring all these amazing Zoom events I was being invited to. Just like it was all just like too much. And like, oh, I'm supposed to make myself a better person while the fucking world is ending. Like, fuck everyone. Fuck productivity. Sorry, I don't mean to curse so much. But I'm coming back to myself a little, and I am feeling a little more inspired to get involved and to do some things. And but my point is, don't make yourself feel bad if you're not being super productive and working on yourself nonstop during this time. Like, it's hard. Just stay alive, just stay sane, take care of your family, stay healthy or get healthy. But yeah, if you have some time to reflect on past journeys, you know, go for it if that speaks to you, for sure. It's important work. It's the hardest part. It's the part we all want to skip, but you can't. You gotta keep doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, recontextualizing and reframing is fascinating work.
Yeah, I know.
And I do want to, and in case this goes without saying, like, I would probably avoid group ceremonies.
On
Like,
Zoom, like this.
no, like in person.
Oh yeah, well,
Like,
because you do a lot of sharing of things. Yeah.
They're still happening. Somebody called me and said, "Can you help? My shaman is the best." Right? That always opens with my shaman is the best. He's the most authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And he needs a place to put up his teepee.
Oh, obviously, yeah.
So can you help us find a place to rent a teepee? Do you have some land where we can rent to put up the teepee and to build like a sweat lodge? And it's okay because peyote's antiviral and everybody's going to get their own cup. And the heat of the sweat lodge will kill the virus anyway. So
yeah, folks. I mean, Temescal, there's so much. You're sweating so much. All the body fluids. Like, don't go to a sweat lodge right now. Please stay home. Yeah, that's not cool. Like, even if San Pedro is antiviral.
I challenged him, and he goes, "Well, I guess I just trust the medicine more than you do."
Okay, that's interesting. To each his own, but you don't have to facilitate that. I mean, yeah, trust the medicine, but also I think we should trust medical professionals and the process that's going on right now. And, but there's a lot of sharing fluids in ceremony, and I don't think right now it's a good time. Hopefully this summer. And so I think, or this fall, we'll see. I know group ceremonies are beautiful and amazing, but let's keep everyone safe right now. And yeah.
So I had to get that. I needed to process that on a group level as well.
I just said that. Yeah, I was just invited to this cacao sound healing thing at the local spiritual center, and I was like, "You guys are still hosting those? No." So I don't know. It definitely can help people, but maybe over Zoom you could still do sound healing. Maybe.
The compression's not great.
Yeah, I know.
What happens if you're a person? This is a question from the gallery. When a person is constantly trying to gain control of recommendations on how to quote unquote let go.
I know it's really hard. I struggle with this too. You can say let go, like it's just this easy thing that everyone can do, and uh, I'm always resisting too, in a way. And like, yeah, trying to control the experience is it's like the main form of resistance. So I guess I would say, first of all, like forgive yourself for doing that. Like there's no right and wrong way to trip. I think that like part of resistance is we can think we're doing it wrong, and it's like just let go. Maybe resistance is your medicine. But no. But I think that the breathing techniques, these kinds of things, letting your mind wander, maybe saying a mantra. Like I like to say, or my intentions, I've been setting the same intentions for the last few journeys I've gone on, and it's just teach me I'm listening. So and I come back to that as a mantra to just show the experience that I'm totally open. I'm not trying to control it in any way. Like, I just want you to show me what you think I need to see right now. And it's been working for me, sort of. So maybe setting a mantra that's like really opening, like that you can come back to, could be helpful. I think maybe working with less strong medicines or even breath work. If you've never tried holotropic breath work, transpersonal breath work, it could be an interesting place to see if you can let go in that experience. I also think cannabis can be a place people can start to work with, as kind of like an easier medicine than psilocybin, because it also kind of requires this letting go. Like if you're always resisting and fighting a cannabis high, you'll also kind of have like a bad cannabis trip. And so maybe if you start practicing letting go in the cannabis space,
Mm-hmm.
you can get a little strengthen those core muscles, and then go back to psilocybin. I know it's hard. Letting go is like very elusive, but don't beat yourself up, I think, is a big one.
Mm-hmm. I feel like letting go is a muscle. I feel like the more that we are able to do it, the more that we do it, the more we'll be able to do it. And that it's good to practice within your range. Because even, how cool are you listening to somebody else's music in the car? Right? That
Depends
can
on
be
what
a
it
thing,
is.
right? Like how cool are you when the restaurant got your order wrong?
Mm.
Like if you can't be cool to a waitress who got your order wrong, like what hope have you on 5 dried grams in silent darkness?
That's a good point. Yeah. How much patience can you show the whole world and then start showing yourself, right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
good That's a really good practice that. And I didn't say meditation either. I'm a terrible meditator, so I don't come to that answer as quickly because it's hard for me to let go in meditation. But that's a really good way to practice that muscle, to build that skill also. And it's challenging, and that's kind of part of the point.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, the world is very good in that it consistently gives us stuff that we don't want and continually withholds from us the things that we do want. And then how cheerful can we be and graceful when in the face of that?
And can we find lessons in all of those experiences? Because once you start doing that too, that can help. Like, oh, the shitty stuff is just teaching me something new.
Which usually is some variation of be nicer. In my case.
Yeah. Yeah, to yourself or to others, for sure. In my case, it's to myself, but yeah. Yeah, stop. Yeah, it's hard to not control everything. I wish I had a better answer. I wish there was like some quick, easy thing you could do. It's hard work.
Right. Yeah, to just, yeah.
I haven't. Someone's asking in the chat, have I ever tried a float tank or an isolation session? I've been meaning to. I never have done. You seem to be able to let go easier. So yeah, that could be a good place to start as well. Maybe book float tank sessions. Start with like only 30, 45 minutes. See if you can let go in there, build it up. I've been meaning to do it. It's it's on my bucket list. It's not free, so that's always something I got to save up for. But yeah, they seem really like valuable tools for sure.
What do you love about the spirit of the mushroom compared to other psychedelics?
I love that. I mean, the mushroom is like, they're like little tricksters. I really like that about them. I always kind of identified as kind of a prankster, kind of an outsider. I'm kind of like pushing boundaries in a way, and the mushrooms love to do that. I think we're a lot alike. I think maybe they chose me for a reason. But just like why I like mushrooms compared to other psychedelics in general also is uh, the experience to me is so sacred and really like more so than LSD, which is really similar, helps me connect to the universe, like nature, not just nature though. Like I just feel it's cliche. I feel like a part of it, you know, but I really do in this profound way that continues to give me strength because I'm the kind of I can struggle with a lot of depression and stuff, and I can lose hope and not that mushrooms always like fix that for me, but when the mushrooms do show me like beautiful sacred experiences, like I know that it's so silly to think about any other outcome for me than to just keep sharing their message and stuff like that, for sure. Oh, the mushrooms.
What are your thoughts? I have a question from somebody privately who has a lot of chronic pain. Do you have thoughts about mushrooms and chronic pain?
I mean, I'm not a doctor, but it could be interesting if you like. So the body stores a lot of stress and trauma, right? And so if your chronic pain, you know, if it could be related to some stress or maybe where you're holding stress. Like I know I do that. I hold it all in my like lower back when I'm on deadline, and then I have really bad lower back pain. It's not chronic, but so I think that there's potential there. I think that that might be the kind of thing you might want to work with a facilitator on, not necessarily maybe a psychedelic integration coach or therapist if you can't find one. But I think there's potential for sure. I heard that something like half of fibromyalgia patients have PTSD, and that like I think a lot of it is storing stress and trauma in painful places in the body. And there's a lot of talk on how mushrooms and ayahuasca can help, and I think even MDMA, like in a therapeutic context, help people start to, you know, I don't know about heal or clear some of that, but it can. I think it can help. It depends.
I sometimes find one of the things that I think is interesting is sometimes when pain starts to, well, one thing that I've noticed about pain is that I hate it.
Yeah.
And so that's a problem twice. Like it's one thing to have an unpleasant sensation in the body. It's another thing to be vehemently opposed to it. And then it's a whole other thing to come up with a story about like why it's your fault or why you're not good or why you messed up because you have it. So there's like this whole complex thing that's happening that's more than just an unpleasant sensation in a part of the body. And so one of the nice things about like psychedelics for me is that I can start to unravel those knots and be like, oh, well, this is like, okay, so this is actually a sensation. Okay. And then here's the fact that like, I feel like I'm not good enough because I have that pain. Right. And so, and then we'll just we'll just let that go. And one of the things that I find is that the sensations start to reveal themselves as patterns of stuck energy. So as more than I'm dealing with like this whole, insane situation that's just piled on, this rat king of unpleasantness, is like what I'm dealing with is a throbbing. right? That is just a throbbing and just sort of like a bound up, a twist, a tension that just kind of wants to release and open, and can do so if I'm not just so busy blaming it for not being the way I want it to be. And so that is where my pain relief comes from.
Yeah, no, and that comes from some significant like inner journey work, right? And understanding, but that's what these medicines can give you. So there's definitely potential there. I know I can like feel my body so differently. And so often when I'm, in that space, especially on mushrooms, I'll realize that I'm like always sitting in weird positions to like make other people comfortable or something. And if I finally like relax and sit straight or how I'm comfortable, it's like this totally new thing. So just getting in touch with your body on mushrooms can be beneficial, whether or not you unwind all the knots or not. I think that you can start to get in touch and find certain areas and things and learn to even just sit differently. Um, things like that can just be really obvious, and things you never think of in normal everyday life. You're like, why am I always like this? Don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. And, they do pair pretty well with, gentle yoga.
Yeah.
It's like I can learn so much about my body by, having a little yoga practice. I've learned a long time ago, I'm not as young and spry as I used to be, but I've certainly learned over time, like, not to push it. There were times when like very vigorous yoga was like a lot of fun for me. It was very, very exciting to push my body. And I have learned that in altered states, there's no need to be, if you're on a heroic dose, there's no need to be heroic in your yoga practice too. Because
Totally. I know.
You wake up the next day and you're like, how did I hurt myself that way?
Totally. And I know for me, like the whole, like my body feels a little different thing. Like I don't have as good of balance sometimes too. And so yoga takes a lot of balance. It can be cool to get into the zone, but yeah, doing things that are too tricky I think I would just like twist an ankle or something for sure.
Do you guys mind if I repeat what I said? That Chloe wants me to repeat what I said about his egg.
Please. Yeah, please do.
If you're not focused on, so what we call pain is often not just physical sensation. It's a amalgam of physical sensation and emotion and negative thought, right? Unpleasant emotion and negative thought. And so that gets all wrapped up and it's very confusing. And we don't really, unless we're trained, we're not able to parse it apart into its separate pieces and deal with it individually. It's just a kind of a mess. So what psychedelics can do is hold your attention in that place long enough to unwrap the pieces of the rope. So it's almost like if you had a rope that was 3 pieces of rope and sort of like, okay, this is the emotion, right? This is the sadness about the pain, and that needs its own love and care. And then this is me thinking that I'm not good enough because I have the pain, and that needs its own care. And then that in itself, and then I have the actual physical sensation, and that needs its own love and care. So that's what I was getting at, Chloe, is kind of learning to get really granular with your attention and awareness.
It's a beautiful goal, I think, for people. Yeah, no, that's really insightful. Thanks for sharing that, Daniel. Mm-hmm. That's great.
Do you want to? I mean, I'm not sure if you want to touch this one. Do you want to talk about sex on shrooms?
Well, I'm the Playboy girl, right? I mean, people definitely do it. I think it can facilitate a really intense connection. I think that the most important thing is to discuss this beforehand with your partner. Like, if this is something you're interested in doing, don't bring it up when you're peaking. Like, talk about it before you guys eat the mushrooms. Be like, hey, babe, like, would you be interested maybe after we peak, like going into the bedroom? And, you know, just make sure that that intention is communicated first. I mean, I don't see any harm in it if it's someone that you're in a loving or just in a relationship with. I think that people, get really, I think also though, like besides sex on shrooms, that just having a mushroom experience with another person, especially a significant other, is like such a crazy, beautiful bonding experience. Like whether or not you have sex, it's like your minds are having sex kind of in a way. And it's really beautiful. I think you can really start to like understand your partner in a way that you just can't see in normal everyday life sometimes, and that can be really beneficial. You know, in or out of the bedroom. I think that definitely negotiate that. But whether or not you have sex, it is such an intense bonding experience. And whether it's your significant other or not, like with friends, it can be really connecting on this deep level. I think that there's a lot of benefits to using mushrooms with close friends and family. It doesn't always have to be like solo journey work. And we can kind of forget about that, especially lately with all the medical and healing stuff. Like, oh, I have to wear eye shades the whole time and listen to music and do this thing. It's like, it doesn't have to be like that. I think that when I trip with like my partner, you know, sometimes we just lay down and hold hands and listen to music and close our eyes, and we can do a little journey work together, and having that grounding is really nice. But also just like talking and sharing a mango or some weird fruit and being like, oh my God, this is great. You know, can just be, you know, and then you can like get into these deep conversations and thoughts together if you want. You can have these really profound realizations about your relationship or just relationships in general. All these kinds of insights and stuff can also come if you're doing some light activities or with some people. It doesn't always have to be intense going inward. I think even if you're looking for some, you know, perspective or insight, that can come in a lot of ways. You can come dancing. Like, I don't know if you go to a club, but like at home in your living room, you know, these kinds of things can also release energy and get things flowing and get some knots untied in different ways that you didn't even know were there.
Almost what I'm hearing when you're saying that, you're sort of talking about how do we create, we're talking again about how do we create our own ceremonies.
Yeah.
Like, I'm almost thinking about like, oh, like we're having a mango ceremony now.
Just cut it up before you start tripping. That's my only advice. But I mean, yeah, there's all sorts of like, I mean, and the book goes into it a little, like, I think, you know, some different little activities and things you can set up and things like that, because the journey doesn't have to always be, this like going inward ceremony. It can be an outward ceremony.
Cool. Any other questions? Okay, people want you to not go to the clubs on mushrooms.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, don't go to, that was a joke. Yes, please don't go out to a club on mushrooms. But dancing can be nice at home or in the park, maybe in the woods. Yeah.
More questions from the crowd?
Bad trips? What about bad trips? Anything
talk about
specific? I mean, I think, okay, do we think bad trips are real, or is it a challenging experience that we have to work through? What do you want to say, Daniel?
I think that's true. I think so. Challenging experiences we've talked about, things come up and we let them go.
Mm-hmm.
That's assuming that like you've taken a decent dose, you've taken the right dose. Your biochemistry and psychology works well with the mushroom, and it is what you say it is, right? It's like there's people who are allergic to peanuts. Like, are they just having a challenging experience?
No.
Right? And so, like, which are more intense, is peanuts or mushrooms?
Interesting. I think that, so in the book, I say that I think they're two different things. I think there are bad trips, and I think there are challenging experiences, and you can learn from both. But I think that bad trips are kind of not preventable, but you can, like, all the safety tips in my book, like preparing your set and setting and doing all this stuff first, are like ways to avoid bad trips in a way. It's like you're setting up this safe, comfortable container so you can just like release to the experience, no matter what it is, whether it's like positive or painful. But then bad trips, I think if you take, you know, mushrooms like spontaneously, like drunkenly at a party or something, then yeah, you might have a bad trip because you're not prepared. You can be overwhelmed by the experience, like that, but not necessarily also. But if you're unprepared, like you don't know what to expect and all these other types of things, you can also be overwhelmed and just wish it was over the whole time. I think that's a pretty common bad trip experience. You're just like, when is this over? And I think that comes out of lack of preparation more than anything. But if you do get into that, there's things you can do. You can like accept, show curiosity and compassion, breathe, put your feet on the ground. But I think, so one of the other things I learned people do to deal with challenging stuff is to prepare like activities or distractions before they go into the experience. So you can like, I learned this from my interviews with mushroom users for the book. A lot of people were like, putting art supplies on their kitchen table or coloring books or that kind of thing. And then if they felt like they were getting stuck in a negative thought loop, they would like, take the eye mask off, get out of the bedroom, walk to the kitchen and start drawing. And that kind of like distraction just shifted the energy. It brought them from one destination to another. It distracts you, but it also just gives you something else. And then maybe you have some insight, maybe you move on, maybe you just like really enjoy the colors of the crayons. Like you don't have to be an artist. This doesn't have to be like paint or anything. You can just buy a pack of crayons, like the big kind, and some big sketchbook. It can be really fun. If you're a musician, some musical instruments, you could have some art books, nature books out to look at, things, back to the kitchen. Maybe you want to have a snack or a piece of fruit. Like these kinds of things can, I say, distract you from challenging material, but really just kind of like shift the experience, shift the energy, and help you move on maybe. And then maybe when you're moving on, when you're eating that mango, you're like, that was all so silly. Why was I so caught up in that? Or I don't know, like lots of different things can happen. But, and then also the other thing you can do is connect with people. So like if you do have a trip sitter or a guide and you're really struggling, like you're just kind of getting stuck somewhere, you can tell them. Or if you're with your friend, you can tell them. You don't have to go into too much detail on like what's bringing you down, but just like sharing a moment with your friend, being like, oh, look at the grains of the wood on the table, and having a laugh over the dog or something can just like kind of help you shift and just, it's a journey, right? You don't have to be stuck at one destination the whole time. You can help yourself move. And yeah, there are some things you can do like that.
And the nice thing about mushrooms is that generally they look like what they are. You can look at it and you can see, oh, that's a mushroom. When it comes to things like pressed tabs of MDMA or tabs of LSD, is that there are sometimes they are sold as one thing and they are actually something that you don't want to take. And they can be either poorly, they can be poor chemistry, they can be done poorly, or be a combination of stuff that can create really unpleasant side effects. And you could probably, and you can do all of your breathing and letting go that you could want to do, and it could be unpleasant for days.
Yeah.
Or it could be fentanyl and you could die. And that's probably, I would call that a bad trip.
Definitely. And if you are using LSD or MDMA, really try to test your substances. It's one of the other key like harm reduction things you can do to avoid a bad or dangerous experience is to test your LSD or MDMA, dance safe, and double blind, sells test kits. They're sort of reasonable. I think it's a really good way to go. But you're right with mushrooms. And another thing with mushrooms to make sure, I mean, likely you're not going to be getting something totally different, but you can get to know your source is a good way to make sure you're getting the mushrooms they tell you are. That's possible. And you can always grow your own. So yeah, there's a lot of things you can do to make sure your medicine is what it says it is.
Yeah. Cool. So where can people find your book?
Yeah, so it's on all the regular sites. It's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and they both have their own digital versions. So for Kindle or Nook, it's also on Powell's Books. You can order it, and you can also find it at a local bookstore with indiebound.org. And maybe your local bookstore is delivering books right now, so you have to look into that. But there's a bunch of options, especially if you don't want to support Amazon. There's a lot of other options. And all the links to that stuff is on my website, Janikian.com. But if you Google Your Psilocybin Mushroom Companion or type it into any one of those resources, you'll find it.
Right on. Thank you. I'm also going to put up the donate link. If Michelle has lost a certain amount of income from not being able to go on this tour. Times are tough all over. If you don't have a job right now, don't donate. But if you do, consider it. And we're doing a 3-way split, and a third of the proceeds go to the World Central Kitchen.
Yeah. So if you can, no, it's not. Yeah, if you can't right now, we all understand it's a crazy hard time. But if you can afford it, yeah, $10, and we'll donate some 1/3 to help some people in need right now. So
Yeah.
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 Thank you all so much.
Jose is an amazing human being. This guy feeds hundreds of thousands of people a year.
Yeah, the organization's great. Yeah, no, I'm happy to support. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in. This was really cool. And I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming and listening, and just, stay safe out there.
Do you have any last messages that you want to leave people with?
Yeah, I mean, just stay connected now more than ever. And, yeah, I just really hope people don't give up in this crazy time, because I can see how easy it would be. And, we're all here for each other still. And keep coming to events like this, or any way you connect with your friends and family. And, that's the thing that the mushrooms are always going to teach us, to stay connected. We're stronger when we work together. So even during this weird time, we got to stick together.
Yeah. Do you have any other Zoom events?
I don't have anything planned, but maybe I should do something. Let me know if you guys had a good time. I'll try to figure something out. I'm really active on my Instagram, is the last place people can find me, at michelle.janikian. And if I do something else, I'll put it on there. So stay tuned.
Very cool. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. Bye. Thank you.
If people want to unmute themselves and say bye, sometimes that's cute and fun.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for the talk. It was great.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome, everybody. No, thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. You did great.
Thank you. I was nervous.
Don't be.